Hey guys, we are talking about the Monstera siltepecana or siltepecana. I'm actually not sure how it's pronounced, but this is a very easy to care for plant. It grows pretty quickly, and I feel like compared to other uncommon plants, this one is less expensive than those. So if you're just getting into more like rare or uncommon plants, this is a really good one to start out with. So for lighting, it can handle low light, but it would prefer having a brighter light situation. Definitely no direct sun, but I think the really good part is that it can handle low light. Although the leaves are going to grow smaller, it's probably not going to grow as quickly. It would definitely be happier in a bright light to medium light situation. So this smaller plant here, by the way, these plants are the same exact age. This smaller plant was grown in a low light setting. So you can definitely see the difference in the size of the plants and the size of the leaves. So keep that in mind depending on how you want your plant to look. This one is grown in medium light, I would say. I can't fit it underneath my grow light, so it kind of grows off to the side and it doesn't get as much light as plants directly under the grow light, but it still gets a good amount of light, and it's been growing really well, as you can see. So just imagine how it would do with really bright indirect sunlight. Another way to get these really big, gorgeous leaves is to stake your plant. So you can see both of my plants are now staked, but this one I started off not staking it at all, so it was just growing freely. And again, that's probably another reason why the leaves are so tiny, but you can probably notice on this one, as the plant climbs the bamboo pole, the leaves get larger. So if you're really going for those large leaves, then I would highly suggest staking. This plant originally wasn't staked, but when I took it out of its propagation chamber, I put it on this stake, and you can already see the leaves are getting bigger as it goes up this little stick. You can also let this plant trail, although in my opinion I think it looks a little bit too similar to a Cebu blue. If you look closely, you can definitely tell they're different plants, but I feel like it just gives off too much of the same vibe. So I really prefer to stake it. As the plant climbs, the leaves will get bigger, so you'll be able to notice the really cool vein pattern of the leaves. It has a really nice kind of embossing, and there's this really pretty grayish sheen to it. So I highly recommend staking, but of course if you want your plant to trail, then you can let it trail. For watering requirements, they are not really picky, so if you forget to water them a couple of times, it's not going to show up on the plant itself. Like most plants, if it gets too thirsty, it will droop, so you don't have to be super exact with your watering schedule, but just like giving it enough light, it's going to really benefit the plant in the end. You're probably going to get a lot more growth than if you skip out on the watering a lot. Usually what I will do is I will wait until only the bottom part of the soil is a little bit damp. So around here, when the terracotta dries, then I'll water it. Since this is in a porous pot and the soil is super well draining, I end up watering this kind of often, in my opinion, like every 3 to 4 days, which I think is a lot. And for this one, it's not in as light of a soil mix, so I can go longer without watering it. I would say around every 5 days I end up watering this one, even though it is in a smaller pot. So for that reason, you should definitely feel how dry the soil is instead of sticking to a number of days that you take to water your plant, because some days the soil dries out quicker than other days, and you don't want to keep those roots waterlogged. Also, you might notice that after you water, maybe the day after, there are some water droplets that could be kind of coming from the tips of the leaves, and that is perfectly normal. That is just the plant sweating, so it's getting rid of any excess water it might have had. So yeah, it's nice to know that there is a little buffer and your plant is not going to completely fall apart if you forget to water it every once in a while. And that kind of also goes into the soil part of things. I do recommend an airy soil, so a lot of orchid bark and perlite or pumice, just a lot of aerating amendments, because since this is an aroid, it does like to climb. So if you give it orchid bark, it really loves to grab onto that. The roots will grab onto the orchid bark and it will provide more airflow for the roots. And that's what I have for both of these plants, although this one does have a lot more amendments than this one, which is why this soil dries out more quickly. So you can kind of fix that based on your watering habits as well. If you're overwatering, you can put more amendments, and if you underwater, you can add less amendments. But I do think a terracotta pot or a clay pot is a really good idea for these, and it can be in a ceramic or plastic pot, but I think that clay and terracotta are going to be the most beneficial. And to propagate this plant, propagation is so easy. For this one, it didn't have roots when I bought it, so I put it in soil and then I put it into a plastic bag and I watered it occasionally, and it grew lots of roots in the process. So I really prefer that method since it's already in soil. You can also put it in sphagnum moss, which I think is really good. You just take a cutting like you would a pothos or a philodendron, a heartleaf philodendron, and maybe remove the bottommost leaf from the bottom node. Put that into sphagnum moss. Water the sphagnum moss whenever you notice that it dries out. And that's a really great way to get roots from this. And you can also water propagate, of course, which I think this plant, no matter which propagation method you choose, has a really high success rate. So I think that if you propagate this plant, it will most definitely root in due time. I have these plants on poles, and this one has outgrown the pole. Someone asked me that what to do if the plant outgrows the pole. Do you cut it? Or what do you do? So you can definitely propagate the plant. You can cut off where it's getting too tall. It's gonna continue growing from there though, so you might want to cut it a little bit lower down. What I'm doing right now is I have kind of bent it in a loop so that I'm sending it back down the pole, and then when it gets back to the base, I'll send it back up. So I'm kind of doing a little zigzag motion. I think that is everything. Oh, for fertilizer, I like to use fish fertilizer. I just mix it in with water, Alaska fish fertilizer, and they seem to really like that. Since I live in Southern California, it's a very temperate climate, so growing season for this plant is basically all year round. If you're somewhere where there's not a lot of sun in the winter time, then you probably don't need to fertilize it during the winter, but if you do get enough sunlight, then you can continue fertilizing in the winter, although I would cut back a little bit. And in the spring and summer, you can definitely fertilize it as much as the recommended amount on your fertilizer bottle. So for these, I'll kind of fertilize them maybe like 3 times a month in the summer, like once in the winter time if I feel like it needs it. That is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!